They said the storm that night was nature's cleansing rage. But storms don't rage without reason. Somewhere between lightning and silence, a decision was made that rewrote bloodlines, erased truth, and chained destiny itself. Two women labored within the same property, one wrapped in silk, the other in rags. But both were prisoners, one of status, the other of skin. When their children were born within hours of each other, something ancient stirred. A whisper as old as power itself exchanged them. The Countess, Margot de Villefort, was everything society worshipped: beauty, breeding, and deceit. Her husband, a southern patriarch with the arrogance of empire. Her lover, a French doctor who'd fled his own nation's revolution. And beneath them all, the woman who served, Celeste, forced to carry his blood in secret. They were four players in a ritual older than Charleston itself. A ritual of control. And the child swap that night was no accident. It was an offering. The storm howled outside, but the true violence happened in candlelight. A noblewoman's bastard and a slave's heir cried their first cries in the same breath. And when the midwife, Mama Ruth, whispered that unholy suggestion, "Switch them," 3 hearts broke in the name of survival. The Countess agreed, because her beauty couldn't shield her from scandal. Celeste agreed, because love couldn't protect her child from chains. And the doctor agreed because he believed the lie would end suffering. It didn't. It multiplied it. When dawn came, the world believed a white heir had been born. The lie breathed. The truth was buried, in linen and guilt. What began as a moment of desperation became a multi-decade deception, feeding a dynasty's illusion of purity and power. The Countess's son, the slave's son, grew to inherit wealth, name, and empire. The true daughter of nobility, raised in servitude, learned obedience instead of privilege. But here's the part they never wrote in the records. That night, when the switch happened, the 3 adults swore silence not to each other, but to something darker. Every lie made in the name of blood binds to a force that feeds on deceit. And that night, the South gained a new dynasty. One built on a pact sealed not in ink, but in sin. They grew together beneath the same roof, bathed in the same Carolina light, and yet, one was called master, the other servant. 2 souls bound by a secret older than their first breath. Charles, the supposed heir to the Piton fortune, was raised to command. Marie, the supposed slave child, was raised to obey. But blood remembers what paper denies. From their earliest days, they shared something unspoken, an invisible current that neither status nor training could sever. When he wept, she felt it. When she laughed, he listened. The Countess watched them like a priest guarding an altar. She saw the resemblance that no one dared name. She saw in Marie her own eyes, her own defiance. Every lesson she taught her, son, reading, music, posture, the rituals of power, she mirrored in secret with Marie, under the guise of generosity. But in truth, she wasn't raising a slave child, she was raising the reflection of her shame. And every time the girl curtsied, the Countess's guilt tightened its grip. Celeste, too, lived her half-life in silence. She dressed her son for church and bowed before him in public. She polished the silver that he ate from. But when no one watched, her eyes followed him with a love that could never speak its name. She had traded her motherhood for his freedom, and that kind of sacrifice festers. It transforms love into obsession, faith into fire. Dr. Russo, the man who forged the lie, returned often. He came to treat the Countess, but he stayed to study the consequences of their pact. He watched Charles grow proud, confident, entitled, the perfect product of deceit. He watched Marie grow brilliant but quiet, her intelligence shackled behind etiquette and servitude. He saw that the exchange had not saved anyone, it had inverted the balance of justice itself. And yet, beneath the calm of Southern respectability, the house pulsed with tension. The walls of the Piton estate carried whispers. the nurse who wondered at the child's strange eyes, the cousin who joked about Marie's uncanny resemblance to the mistress. Secrets like this never sleep. They only wait, because the deeper the lie is buried, the more violently the truth claws its way back to the surface. And when blood starts to remember, history burns. By the time Charles turned 13, the plantation bowed before his shadow. Tutors praised his intellect. Servants trembled at his silence. He had inherited not just the Piton name, but the cold certainty of a boy bred to rule. Yet, beneath that composure lived something wild, an anger he couldn't name. The Countess called it temperament. Dr. Russo called it genius. But Celeste knew it for what it was, the blood remembering its chains. Marie, now 12, had become the Countess's constant companion, reading beside her, playing piano while guests admired the educated slave girl. She absorbed everything. The way men looked at power, the way women concealed pain behind pearls, the way her mistress's eyes softened when she brushed her hair. Marie had been taught to bow, but not to break. Somewhere inside her, a sleeping inheritance stirred. A voice that whispered, "You were never meant to kneel." The house itself seemed to feel the tension. The grand hall smelled of jasmine and secrets. Late at night, the Countess would drift through its corridors like a ghost, pausing outside the nursery door, listening to Charles dream in his inherited bed, her steps tracing the path between sin and salvation. Sometimes she would steal into the slave quarters just to watch Marie sleep. No one knew if it was maternal love or madness, perhaps both. Dr. Russo, haunted by his creation, began keeping records of the children's behavior. His notes, written in coded French, revealed his terror, that the soul recognizes its lineage even when the mind is deceived. He saw it in Charles's contempt for cruelty, in Marie's refusal to flinch before power. He warned the Countess that nature was starting to reclaim what deception had stolen. She dismissed him with the calm cruelty of a woman who could not afford to feel. But fate is patient. On the eve of Charles's 14th birthday, during a dinner for Charleston's elite, the illusion cracked. Marie, serving wine, brushed past him, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes locked. Guests would later whisper that the room changed temperature. He froze mid-sentence. She dropped the tray. The Countess turned pale. No one understood it, but something ancient had recognized itself. Blood calling to blood, truth stirring beneath the gold. The moment their eyes met, the lie began to decay. It didn't happen with thunder, but with silence. That cold, suffocating silence that only truth can bring. The Countess excused herself from the table, her hand trembling around her wine glass. Celeste stood frozen in the doorway, her instinct screaming what her mind refused to accept. Dr. Russo, seated among the guests, saw it too. The prophecy of consequence had begun. Charles didn't sleep that night. His dreams were filled with fragmented visions. A storm, a cradle, a woman's cry echoing through lightning. He woke before dawn, drenched in sweat, unable to explain why Marie's eyes haunted him. The next morning, he found her in the garden, trimming roses. She didn't look up. "You shouldn't be out here," she said softly. But he didn't listen. "When I look at you," he whispered, "it feels like I've seen you before, somewhere that doesn't exist." Her hands shook. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The truth had already begun its slow possession. Meanwhile, the Countess was unraveling. The lie that had protected her for 14 years now suffocated her. Every look from Marie was a reminder of her betrayal, every word from Charles a mirror of her guilt. Her husband, old, proud, blind, saw only the perfect southern hair and the charming slave girl, but society's eyes had begun to sharpen. Charleston's gossip circles had caught the scent of something unspeakable, a resemblance too strong to ignore. Celeste prayed each night, but even her faith had turned bitter. The boy she had birthed now commanded her with the authority of ownership. "Yes, young master." scraped against her soul like a blade. She began to see the pact for what it was, not salvation, but punishment, a divine correction written in pain. Dr. Russo's letters to the Countess became more urgent. Truth, when denied, becomes a living force, he wrote, and when it awakens, it takes everything. But she refused to heed him. Her pride was her last religion, and so the balance began to tilt. Fate had given them 14 years of borrowed peace. Now it came to collect. For every secret buried, a soul would be stripped bare, and for every lie told beneath the storm, a truth would rise demanding blood. By 1845, the Petun mansion had become a temple of illusion. Marble floors polished with guilt, chandeliers gleaming above generations of deceit. To the world, it was a symbol of aristocratic perfection. But beneath its foundation, the rot had begun to spread. Servants whispered of strange events, mirrors shattering without cause, the piano playing faintly at night, and the Countess pacing through empty rooms whispering to someone who wasn't there. The pact that once saved her now consumed her. Charles, the false heir, had become everything his father desired, articulate, composed, and ruthless. But his eyes betrayed him. Behind the calm mask, something tormented stirred, a gnawing emptiness he couldn't define. He often walked the fields alone, staring at the slave quarters with a pain that confused him. He didn't understand that he was looking at the life that should have been his. Marie, now nearly 15, had grown into quiet grace, intelligent beyond her years, cautious with every word. Her status as a favored house servant protected her from cruelty, but not from the cold machinery of hierarchy. Yet even her silence carried power. Guests noticed how she moved like she belonged, how her gaze met theirs without fear. The women whispered that the Countess had spoiled her. The men stared too long, and the Countess, consumed by paranoia, began to resent the very child she had once protected. Celeste saw what was coming long before anyone else. The lie was fracturing. The Countess's love for Marie had twisted into jealousy. Charles's confusion had turned to anger. And beneath it all, the spiritual debt of that storm night pulsed, like a curse too long ignored. Dr. Russo, older now, visited less frequently. But when he did, he saw the signs clearly. The Countess had begun drinking heavily. The Colonel's health was failing. The servant's loyalty was crumbling, and in Marie's eyes he saw awakening, the dawning recognition that she was more than property. He warned Celeste quietly, if she ever learns the truth, the house will not survive it. The doctor was right, because some truths are not meant to be revealed. They are meant to be survived, and when the first spark of rebellion flickered in Marie's mind, the legacy of 1831 began to shatter. The switch that forged a dynasty was about to destroy it. It began one humid night in August, when the air hung thick with the smell of magnolia and decay. The Countess sat before her dressing mirror, staring into her reflection as if it were a stranger. The candlelight flickered, and for a moment she swore she saw not her own face, but Marie's. The same eyes, the same delicate jawline. Her glass of wine slipped from her hand and shattered across the marble floor. Outside, thunder rolled like a buried confession clawing its way to the surface. The next morning, she summoned Celeste. She's beginning to look too much like me, the Countess whispered, trembling. They'll talk. They already do. Celeste said nothing. She had long stopped protecting her mistress's conscience. You made this, madam, she replied coldly. No, you must live with it. The Countess struck her across the face. The first and last act of violence between the two women. Neither spoke of it again, but both knew the end had begun. Charles, restless and tormented, had taken to watching Marie from afar. He couldn't understand his obsession. Was it affection, pity, or something deeper, something forbidden that defied all sense? When she laughed, something inside him ached. When she cried, it burned, and when she looked back at him, truly looked, he felt an echo of himself reflected in her eyes. "Why do I feel this way?" he asked Dr. Russo one day. The doctor's answer was short and haunted. "Because truth recognizes itself, Charles, even in disguise." That same week, a visiting cousin from New Orleans remarked at dinner that the young house girl had the Countess's very face. The words were light, but they landed like a gunshot. The room froze. The Countess's smile cracked, her knuckles whitening around her glass. Marie's breath caught, and Charles, for the first time, saw it clearly. The resemblance that no one could deny. That night, thunder returned. Marie found the Countess sitting alone, her face pale as bone. "You've always been my favorite," the Countess said quietly, her voice trembling. "But there are things you must never ask about." Marie didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth had already found her. And outside, as rain struck the Peaton estate, lightning illuminated the old family portrait. The Countess, the Countess, and the child they had stolen. The glass over it cracked straight through the boy's face. The storm rolled in from the sea the same way it had 14 years ago. Black skies, splitting thunder, and rain that beat against the earth like the drum of judgment. The Peaton estate glowed with candlelight as servants hurried to secure the shutters. But no one could shut out what was coming. The air itself seemed alive, humming with something ancient and unmerciful. Marie lay awake in her narrow bed, her heart pounding. That cousin's careless remark had lodged itself like a thorn in her mind. Every reflection, every whisper, every cold stare from the Countess now made sense. She remembered the way Celeste avoided her questions as a child, the way Dr. Russo flinched when she smiled. And now, when she looked at Charles, she saw it too. The same shape of the mouth, the same fire behind the calm. She pressed her hands to her face and whispered, "No, it can't be." But the blood always knows. In the grand hall, the Countess drank in silence. Lightning illuminated the portraits, generations of Peaton staring down at her as if in judgment. Her husband, long sick, slept in another wing, unaware that the dynasty he built was crumbling within its own marble walls. Dr. Russo sat across from her, soaked from the storm, his eyes filled with dread. "You must tell them," he said softly. "If you do not, the truth will tell itself, and when it does, it will not speak kindly." The Countess's voice broke. "If I confess, I lose everything. My name, my son, my soul." He leaned forward. "You lost those the night you made the exchange." At that moment, a scream tore through the corridor. Both turned. Marie stood at the top of the staircase, holding the shattered remnants of the portrait she had ripped from the wall. The candlelight trembled around her. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. "Tell me, madam, who am I?" The Countess's face drained of color. Charles appeared behind her, confusion and horror mixing on his face. The lie that had survived 14 years had finally met its reckoning. Outside, thunder cracked louder than ever. The same storm that had birthed the deception had come to witness its undoing. For a long moment, no one moved. The rain lashed against the windows like a furious hand, and thunder rolled so deep it shook the chandeliers. The Countess stood frozen at the base of the staircase, pale and trembling. Marie's eyes burned with tears and fury. Charles looked between them, his mind struggling to piece together the fragments of a truth he had never been allowed to see. "Answer me," Marie demanded, her voice quivering but firm. "Who am I? Why do I look like you?" The Countess's lips parted, but no sound came. Her throat seemed to close under the weight of the words she had buried for 14 years. Dr. Russo stepped forward, but she raised a trembling hand. "No," she whispered. "This is mine to tell." Slowly, she climbed the stairs toward Marie, each step echoing through the hall like a death toll. "You were born in this house," she began, her voice breaking. "But not as a servant. You were born in my bed under that storm." She looked to Charles, whose face had gone white. "And you," she whispered, tears spilling freely now, were not mine to keep. You were Celeste's child. The silence that followed was unbearable, thick, suffocating, eternal. Then Charles stumbled back as though struck. "You're lying," he said, his voice cracking. "That's impossible." Marie, still gripping the broken frame, stared at her, at the woman she had served, trusted, and loved, and felt something inside her shatter. "You stole my life," she whispered, the words shaking with rage. "You stole my mother, my name, my blood." The Countess fell to her knees, her sobs echoing off the marble. "I thought I could make it right," she gasped. "I thought love could erase it. But love could not erase theft. Not the kind carved in flesh and bone." Celeste appeared in the doorway then, her face hollow but fierce. "You may have switched them," she said quietly, "but you couldn't change what God wrote." She turned to Marie, her voice trembling. "Child, you are mine." Marie dropped the frame and fell into her mother's arms, sobbing. Charles stood alone in the storm's shadow, watching everything he believed crumble. The rain beat harder, as if the heavens themselves mourned the sins of the living. The storm showed no mercy. Wind screamed through the halls, blowing open doors as if the house itself sought to purge its sins. Lightning tore the sky in white fury, illuminating 3 figures locked in the center of a tragedy that had taken 14 years to surface. The Countess knelt weeping on the marble floor, her gown drenched in spilled wine and tears. Celeste held Marie tightly, whispering prayers between sobs. And Charles stood apart, trembling, a prince suddenly stripped of his crown, a boy staring into the abyss of his stolen identity. "I am not your son," he whispered, his voice hollow. The Countess looked up at him, desperation blazing through her grief. "You are my son," she cried. "I raised you. I loved you. You raised me on a lie." He interrupted, his voice trembling with rage. "You loved me as a trophy, not as truth." He turned to Celeste then, eyes wet and lost. "And you're saying you're my mother?" Celeste's answer was silent, just a nod, steady, sorrowful, final. Charles staggered backward, his entire world collapsing beneath the weight of a truth too heavy to bear. Marie pulled away from Celeste and faced the Countess. Her voice was low, controlled, and deadly calm. "You thought you could buy peace with our pain. But you made monsters out of all of us." The Countess's eyes widened, her lips trembling. "I did it to save you," she pleaded. "To save him." Marie shook her head. "No, you did it to save yourself." Dr. Russo, who had remained still through the storm of words, finally spoke. "Every secret has a cost," he murmured, "and this house has been paying it in silence for years." A crash of thunder silenced them all. In the distance, one of the ancient oak trees split and fell, shaking the earth as it crushed part of the carriage house. The servants screamed, the lights flickered. The Countess rose to her feet, trembling. "Then let it end," she whispered. "Let the storm take what it must." She reached for Marie's hand, but Marie recoiled, stepping back into Celeste's arms. At that moment, Charles looked at all 3 women, his 2 mothers, his stolen sister, and realized the truth was no salvation. It was a curse. By dawn, the Peaton estate was unrecognizable. The storm had passed, but what it left behind was ruin. Fallen trees blocked the carriage path, shutters hung loose, and the grand chandelier in the dining room lay shattered across the floor, like the last jewel of a dying empire. The slaves moved quietly through the wreckage, whispering prayers, avoiding the great hall where the truth had erupted. The house that once stood as a symbol of Southern nobility now felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by guilt. The colonel died before the sun fully rose. His heart, long weakened, gave out during the storm. He never learned that the son who carried his name was not his blood. The Countess received the news in silence. Her face didn't move, but her eyes dimmed completely, as though the last ember of her will had gone out. She refused food, refused to leave her chair by the window. She simply watched the horizon, the same horizon that had once promised her power, and said nothing. Charles buried his father that afternoon under a weeping willow behind the estate. Celeste stood nearby, her head bowed. Marie did not attend. She sat alone by the river, staring into her reflection, a reflection that was both hers and the Countess's. The wind lifted her hair as she whispered, "I was never meant to serve." The river carried her words away, but the pain stayed. When Charles returned from the burial, he sought her out. "I didn't ask for this," he said softly. She didn't turn to face him. "Neither did I," she replied. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, there was understanding. Two souls bound by a lie neither created, yet both condemned to bear. That night, the Countess took to her bed and never rose again. The servants found her the next morning, still and pale, her rosary tangled in her fingers. In her final note, written in trembling ink, she confessed her sin to God, but not to the world. The paper ended with 3 words, "Forgive my love." When dawn came again, the estate stood silent. The name Piton still adorned the iron gate, but the dynasty was dead. What remained were 2 children of different bloods, both heirs to a legacy not of wealth, but of ruin. After the Countess's death, the mansion became a tomb. The rooms that once rang with piano music and laughter now echoed only with the sound of footsteps and wind. Curtains stayed drawn, and the mirrors, every last one, were covered in black cloth at Celeste's demand. "Let no one else be fooled by reflection," she said quietly. That's how it all began. Charles took control of the estate, though his heart wasn't in it. The world saw a grieving young heir taking his father's place. Only those within the crumbling house knew that the heir was a lie wearing fine clothes. He treated the workers with unexpected mercy, freeing 2 families, paying others from his own inheritance. But every act of kindness felt like penance. He no longer believed he belonged to the name he signed. At night, he walked the halls of the mansion like a prisoner searching for his own cell. Marie changed too. No longer bound by the Countess's command, she carried herself with a quiet, regal defiance. The other servants called her the ghost of Madame, but not out of fear, out of reverence. They saw the truth in her posture, in the fire of her eyes. She was what the Countess could never truly be, a woman of power untainted by lies. Still, she could not forgive. Each corner of the house reminded her of her stolen childhood, her lullabies replaced by orders, her cradle by a servant's cot. Celeste urged her to leave. "This place will poison you," she warned. But Marie refused. "No," she said, "it took everything from me. I will be the one to close its doors." Weeks passed. Dr. Russo visited one last time, his health failing. He found Charles sitting in the ruined garden and Marie by the window, staring at the dying roses. "The past," he told them, "is a living thing. It doesn't vanish. It waits." His words lingered in the air long after he left. On the final night of summer, Marie walked through the mansion carrying a single candle. One by one, she opened every window, letting the night air sweep through. Then she whispered into the darkness, "Let it end." The flame flickered and went out. It started in the dead of night, when the mansion slept under a black sky. A single spark, perhaps from a fallen candle or an old hearth, caught the dry curtains in the Countess's abandoned chambers. At first, it seemed insignificant, a small orange tongue licking the silk, but the house had long carried the weight of betrayal, and every hidden secret fed the fire. Walls cracked as flames raced, consuming decades of deception and dust-laden lies. Marie awoke to the scent of smoke and the distant roar of fire. She ran through the halls, calling for Celeste and Charles, but the fire had grown faster than any of them could imagine. The ceilings collapsed with a sound like thunder, sending embers raining onto marble floors, onto the portraits that had silently judged them for years. Every room they entered revealed a memory twisted, By deceit a cradle where truth had been stolen, a mirror reflecting false promises, a ledger filled with forged names and lives rewritten. Charles, instinctively, tried to save the family heirlooms, the silver, the portraits, the letters of inheritance. But Marie stopped him. "Let it burn," she said, her voice steady, cold. "Everything that was taken from us, everything built on lies, it belongs to the fire now." Her words carried the weight of someone who had seen the truth of generations and refused to submit to it any longer. The wind carried the flames outward, devouring the stables, the gardens, and eventually the main hall. Fire twisted shadows across the remaining walls, giving life to the secrets hidden within them. Celeste stayed close to Marie, guiding her through the smoke-choked corridors. There was no panic in their movements, only the methodical, quiet resolve of those who understood that destruction was purification. By dawn, the mansion was unrecognizable, a skeleton of charred beams and ash. The storm that had once saved the children had returned in a different form, this time to annihilate the symbol of all the lies they had inherited. Charles stood among the ruins, looking at Marie and Celeste. Neither spoke. Words had been exhausted long before the fire. The Peaton dynasty, once the jewel of Charleston, was gone. The wealth, the secrets, the forged lineage, all reduced to smoke and memory. But in that destruction lay a strange liberation. Marie's eyes caught the first light of sunrise on the blackened timbers, and she whispered, "We are free now, free from them, free from the lie." In the weeks after the fire, Charleston whispered, the once proud Peaton estate was nothing but a charred skeleton, and with it, the illusions of a dynasty crumbled. People speculated. Some claimed it was an accident, others said it was divine retribution, but those who knew the truth, Marie, Celeste, Charles, understood that this was not chance. The fire had been a reckoning, a mirror of the blood that would not forget. Marie walked among the ruins every morning, her footsteps crunching over ash and broken beams. Each fragment told a story: the cradle, where her stolen infancy began; the hallway where Charles first glimpsed her as something forbidden; the chamber where the Countess's secrets had festered. The memories were a reminder that blood, once spilled or hidden, carries its own memory, unyielding, insistent, impossible to erase. Charles, now 20, lingered at the edge of the ruins. The boy who had grown believing he was the rightful heir had become a man haunted by uncertainty. His identity, forged by deceit and privilege, was stripped bare. Celeste had given him something she never could: the truth. And yet, the truth did not free him, it demanded reckoning. Every glance at Marie reminded him of the life he could never reclaim. Every shadow whispered of the lies upon which he had walked. Celeste, aged but unbowed, guided them both with a quiet ferocity. She had lived with secrets long enough to know that revelation was only the beginning. She reminded Marie that inheritance was not always wealth or land, but the endurance of spirit, the preservation of truth, the reclamation of what is stolen by silence. And Marie listened. She had seen the manipulation, the corruption, the hidden currents of power that had shaped their lives. The Peaton name was gone, but the lessons it left behind were permanent. She understood now: blood remembers. It remembers what the mind forgets, what the law denies, what society hides. It remembers every lie, every betrayal, every stolen birthright. That memory would guide them. Charles, burdened yet enlightened, began to understand the weight of power and the fragility of legacy. Marie, fierce and resolute, embraced her place not as a victim, but as a custodian of truth. Celeste watched them, her heart both proud and wary. The fire had destroyed the house, but it had ignited a new kind of legacy. One written not in forged names or stolen inheritance, but in knowledge, in awareness, in the unbreakable chain of blood that remembers. Years passed, and the city moved on. Charleston rebuilt around the ashes of the Peaton estate, but those who had lived its horrors carried its legacy within them. Charles and Marie, guided by Celeste's quiet strength, emerged from the shadows of deception forever changed. The stolen bloodlines, the hidden truths, the manipulations of the past, all of it had forged them into something sharper, wiser, more resilient than anyone could have imagined. Charles, now a man, refused the inherited wealth that had once been his by law. Instead, he sought to redefine power, not as dominion over others, but as stewardship of truth. He established schools for freed children, invested in communities the Pitons had long exploited, and quietly ensured that Celeste's family would rise above the chains that had bound them. Every decision he made was a deliberate act of redemption, an attempt to balance the ledger of history that had been violently skewed. Marie, equally determined, embraced her true identity with ferocious clarity. She adopted her mother's name, reclaiming what had been hidden from her. She became a chronicler, documenting the histories that no one else dared to record, stories of stolen lives, secret exchanges, and the machinery of deceit that underpinned the elite. Each entry she wrote was a weapon against the lies, a testament to the power of knowing one's own blood. She trained herself to read not only documents, but human intent, understanding that knowledge is the ultimate inheritance. Celeste watched from the periphery, her satisfaction tinged with sorrow. The pact she had made so many years ago had been monstrous, yet necessary. She had preserved the children, protected the futures of both, and now, in their emergence, she saw the purpose of her own suffering. The fire, the storm, the decades of quiet vigilance. It had all led to this moment, a reclamation of what had been stolen, a rewriting of a history long buried under wealth, pretense, and fear. Together, they became a quiet force, unseen but undeniable. A lesson had been learned: truth, once awakened, cannot be silenced forever, and those who inherit the blood of lies must also inherit the responsibility to remember, to act, and to protect. Now, take a moment and comment below. Blood remembers, I awaken. Repeat it twice. Say it aloud if you must. Let the truth settle in, let it root. This is your mark. Your first step toward understanding the shadows that rule beyond sight and the power you gain when you refuse to be blind. The story of the Pitons is no mere tale of wealth and betrayal. It is a blueprint for the hidden forces that shape the world. What happened in that Charleston mansion? The switch of infants, the concealment of truth, the careful orchestration of life and death, is not an anomaly. It is a pattern repeated across generations, a code written in silence, in fear, and in the private corridors of power. Those who understand it do not merely witness history. They inherit it. Marie, now fully aware of her heritage and the stolen truths, recognized the weight of knowledge. Knowledge is power, but it is also responsibility. To see beyond the veil is to bear a burden most cannot comprehend. Every lie exposed, every injustice revealed, tightens the chain that binds human society. But it also illuminates the paths of freedom. Charles, guided by the same revelation, realized that legacy is not a birthright, it is a choice. And Celeste, the guardian of secrets, understood that the most potent power lies not in domination, but in preservation. In ensuring the right blood carries the truth forward. The fire that destroyed the mansion did more than erase physical evidence. It burned away the illusions of supremacy, leaving only the raw, unalterable reality that deception cannot endure when confronted by clarity. That night, the storm and the flames became symbols of the inevitability of truth and the danger of hiding it. Every generation will face its own storm. Every man and woman will be tempted to rewrite the past. But blood remembers, and so must those who are willing to see. Now, as you watch this, understand, the knowledge you've been given is not entertainment. It is a mirror. It asks you who you are, who you will serve, and what lies you might one day uncover. In your family, your community, or your world, history is not dead. It moves, it breathes, it whispers in the shadows. Those who refuse to see remain blind. Those who awaken step into a dangerous light. Take the lesson, carry it, and guard it. Share it cautiously, for revelation always attracts forces that wish to suppress it. Comment once more, as you have before. Blood remembers, I awaken. Repeat it, feel it. Let it settle into your awareness. You are no longer just a witness. You are now part of the chain, the custodians of truth, the inheritors of knowledge that refuses to die. History will try to hide. Lies will attempt to disguise themselves as reality. But now you know, and that is a power no one can take away.